Hello, Diane. I'm so honored to have Diane Altomare on the Open That Door podcast. This is a real treat. Diane, I'm just going to tell the listeners and viewers, we're on YouTube as well, a little bit about you, and then we'll jump right into our conversation, which I'm really honored to be having this opportunity
Oh,
to have with you.
thank you.
Diane is a master certified integrative life coach, and you've been a coach for over 2 decades. So you started doing this before it became kind of a thing.
I did.
So
Yes.
yeah, we'll find out more about that. You're also
Yes.
a featured expert on NBC and ABC, and you are a motivational speaker, a
Mhm.
wife, a mother, and author of two books, one called Clarity, and then one newly released called More Than Enough.
Yes.
So I'm excited to have you on, and we're going to dive into that book and learn more about you. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. It is so fun to talk with you and connect with you. And I'm just really looking forward to diving in. I know you've had the opportunity to get through almost the whole book, which I was sharing with you before we jumped on here that, that's awesome that you're almost all the way through. Because sometimes people, only get through a chapter or two of a book and then life gets distracting. So
It
I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to say when I did order your book, you included a personalized thank you card in it, which was so touching and so thoughtful. And I think we forget sometimes that the little tiny gestures like that take us all of,
Yeah.
30 seconds or
Yeah.
2 minutes can just make such an impact on the receiver. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I want to hold up your book, More Than Enough. This is Diane's new book, and we're going to dive in because I am finishing this book because it's been so helpful for me as I, build my own motivational speaker, hosting, author business,
Mm-hmm.
and efforts to uplift the world.
Mm-hmm.
This work is so foundational because it to me it gets at the core of what keeps people stuck or holds people back. So I just want to jump in because I know as a one-on-one coach, something that you've done, like I said, for over 20 years, you've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life, different economic levels, different jobs,
Yes.
different
Yes.
origins.
Yes.
And yet you've found kind of one common theme that we all bring forth with
Mm-hmm.
us. Can you share what that is and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's really the reason that I wrote this book is like you shared, I've coached people from all walks of life. So famous, rich, people that seem to have it all. I've coached teenagers, people well into their 80s, and every age in between. And the one thing that I have recognized that has been at most of my clients' struggles, as well as my own, which I share in depth in this book about, is feeling not enough.
Mm,
And I've just seen it destroy people's confidence, diminish their uniqueness and who they are, and really like what lights them up and what they want to do. And it's really heartbreaking to watch people not show up in their life because of this negative soundtrack that many of us have playing in our mind that says you don't have what it takes, you're not as smart as she is, you're not as attractive as he is, you aren't courageous enough, and on and on. And
mm,
so this book really speaks to you can achieve what you want and you should. Like it is our purpose in life
mm,
to create what we are meant to do here. You can do that despite the negative soundtrack criticizing you sometimes at every turn.
mm.
You don't have to wait for that to stop
Ah,
loudly shouting in the background.
interesting. Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that we can have that voice,
Mm-hmm.
that challenge, that obstacle, and still move forward with what lights us up with calls to us.
Exactly. And I'm also going to assert that for most of us, that's the only way to create what we want. Because if you are going to wait until it's just,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm.
there's no waves, there's no challenge, there's no difficulty, there's no distractions in life, there's no internal chaos, there's no fear. If you're going to wait for all of that, most likely you're never going to start.
Yeah.
It's just always going to be
Yeah.
there.
That.
And I know that sometimes that sounds a little disheartening because many of us want to believe that at some point we're going to get to a place where we don't have that intense,
Mm-hmm.
harsh, critical inner
Mm-hmm.
voice. But in my experience, and I'm just speaking from my own, and I'm also speaking of thousands of people that I've coached over the past 24 years, it stays with you. It doesn't go away. And yes, over time, as you rebuild or as you build this confidence in yourself, and as you build more belief in yourself, it gets a little quieter and it doesn't show up as often.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start something new, or you get this opportunity and you're like, wow, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And I'm freaking out because I'm so
Mm-hmm.
scared, right? It's going to come back.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to deal with what is going on internally. And that really is the key to everything.
I agree with you. I it does. I can understand it. You say it might seem daunting to kind of get the message like this. Sorry, this doesn't go away. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, I find that to be a bit of a relief because it takes
Yes.
the onus off. It takes the messaging, which probably is from that part of ourselves, that there's something wrong with us, or I'm
Yes.
broken, so I can't achieve my goals.
Right.
But that person over there must not have these internal struggles. That's why they've succeeded in the way that they have. And what I hear you saying is, no, that person over there has the same thing going on. They've just learned to manage it a little better.
Yes. Yeah. And you would be surprised as to what it may appear that somebody has going on in their life and what is actually going on internally. And I, for 24 years, have had the honor of being able to be witness to and to have people share their inner world with me in a very intimate, deep way. And so I know that we all struggle at times with fear and self doubt and insecurity and inadequacy and anxiety and many different things. And for some of us, it's more prevalent than others at different times in our life. But it definitely is part of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And you have within you the capacity to not allow that to be the director of your life
I love
and
it.
to learn ways to move beyond whatever your specific struggle or issue is so
Mm-hmm.
that you can show up fully and create what you want. And that to me is super exciting.
It is exciting. Personally, I am a person, and foundationally, a lot of it is a kind of the environment we're brought up in and the messaging we get from early
Yeah.
on. But I'm someone with a deep insecurity and fear base. Like that stuff is constantly at work in me, and it has been my whole life. And so, on one hand, I've been in, I'm pretty uncomfortable most days, every day. That's just a state of being that I have to work through and work around. But on the other hand, like the resiliency in me and the capabilities that have come
Yeah.
forth to, manage that and to continue to move my life forward. I don't want to say in spite of, but really that is probably the correct term, in spite of these feelings that want to hold me back. And um, it I think in a way you can see what when you face kind of what the truth is of, I'm deeply insecure, I'm deeply afraid, and yet here I am getting out of bed and showing up. It can show you the light and the strength inside of you as well.
Yeah, and it's really about this balance between honoring I have this insecurity and I have this fear, and I know that this is a part of just who I am, my DNA, or the way that I was raised, or whatever it is. For,
Mm-hmm.
it's different for different people. It's this balance between, yes, I have those things going on, and there are gifts in that. And then also, I have the light and the resilience, and I have those aspects of me that I bring, and that's what makes me unique.
Mm.
So it isn't a getting rid of one side, like what we would
Yeah.
call the dark side,
The
the
shadow,
stuff we
maybe.
don't want, right?
Hmm.
It's
Right.
not about like getting rid of all that and then just waiting until we're fully embracing the light, because that is not what it means to be a human being.
Mm.
We as human beings have the dark and the light, and it's
Hmm.
about the dance between the two and gaining the gifts of all these different qualities that we have and showing up fully to give whatever it is that, our special thing is.
I love that. And there's freedom, I think, in making friends with or peace with, or at least accepting that shadow, the dark side, the shadow side,
Yeah.
the side that makes us work through something to get to
Yes.
the other side. What I want to talk, of course, we're going to move into the more than enough side of ourselves, which is what you're
Yeah.
so brilliant at bringing forth. What I want to go into a little bit, like, how does this negative self-talk in us start? Where does this come from? What have you
That's a
found as a
great
pattern?
question. Yeah, that's a great question. And I devote all of chapter 2 to that, because I think it is really important to know yourself so well that you understand the root of why you are the way you are. So I personally know that growing up in an alcoholic family had many things occurring that I internalized. And that is where my not good enough self started. And then
Okay.
there were different things throughout life that validated, see, yep, I'm not enough, or I don't have what it takes, or, these different negative thoughts that arose, or negative feelings. And so it is important to understand that when you start to feel not enough, or when you hear the negative soundtrack in your mind, there's a reason that
Mm,
it that you
mm,
have that. And knowing what that reason is will start you on the path of being able to, in that moment, recognize, yes, I had that experience. And it also gives you the opportunity to do some deeper inner reflection and healing around what happened that you internalized, right? So
mhm,
that you can start to work through that, which is really powerful. And that's
mhm,
one of the things that I do with people in individual sessions, is look at, past trauma is one of the reasons that we feel not enough.
mhm,
Societal conditioning is another one of the reasons. And there are also times in our life when we didn't measure up.
mm,
And we can, again, internalize that as, that must mean I'm not enough. And it really doesn't. It just means, no, you weren't competitive enough to make the team when you were 12. Maybe you didn't get accepted into the friend clique when you were in high school, or your boyfriend broke up with you in college, or you got passed up for a promotion. And then year after year, we just start to get this message that we're not enough. And what happens is, it can be so often that it gets to the point where we think that that is who we are.
mm.
And it's not. It's
And
just a
then
part of our experience.
a part of our experience. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, that it's almost then like we start looking for clues and proof
Mhm. Yeah,
that we're not
proof.
enough,
Yep.
and miss the moment, the many moments when we're more than enough. We're
Yes.
more than enough.
Yeah.
One thing in your book, when you talk about, and I know you've kept, confidentiality in your book for past clients, but you've talked about sort of the clientele that you've worked with, and you've brought up
Yeah.
different similar. One thing that I love is you don't shy away from kind of healing that inner child, or going into like the wounded child within us, and because I think that's so there couldn't be anything more vulnerable and tender inside of us than that part of us that got wounded, or diminished or denied or humiliated at such a young age. And I think sometimes we want to skip over that work because it can be really uncomfortable and
Mm-hmm.
really vulnerable to go back and sort of see our little selves at a very young age and find out what really happened there. So I first just want to say I love that you don't shy away from that work. And would you say that that often is at the core of some of our from this negative storyline or voice that we then continue to hear?
Most often it is. Most often. And it really is part of the basis and the foundation of some of the deep work I do with people if they have past trauma
Yeah.
and it came from when they were younger. But even not, it is so important to understand that we do have an inner child. We have a wounded aspect of ourself that carries these things like you were talking about earlier, the insecurity or the fear. We have a wounded aspect. And when you can connect with that part of you, and you, as the grown adult now, can bring love and compassion and understanding and be able to start to help that inner child heal. That, in my experience, for example, that it had nothing to do with me,
Mm.
that the person that was an alcoholic in my family didn't stop drinking. Yes, I internalized that just unconsciously, that it meant that I wasn't lovable enough and I wasn't enough, right, to stop that destruction. I internalized that as that, but that's not what it meant at all. It
Mm.
just, the person had trauma and an addiction, and it had nothing to do with me at all. And so being able to honor that inner child and what they experienced is so essential,
Mm.
because if I'm around a lot of alcohol now, I can get triggered. If I see people that are acting in ways that makes me feel insecure or anxiety or uncomfortable, being able to connect with that little girl and just remind her, and it's one of the things I share in Clarity on page 51, you
Mm.
are not re-experiencing what you did as a little girl. Right now
Mm.
in this moment, yes, you're uncomfortable because there's a lot of alcohol and people are acting weird, and but you're a grown adult, you're 53
Mm.
years old, and you're okay and you're
Mm.
safe and you take care of yourself in a way that you couldn't when you were 8 or 12 or 4 or whatever,
Mm.
age it was. And so it's such powerful work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, it can feel scary to go there, but it is also so freeing because,
Mm.
again, it gets you to this understanding of, oh, it's not that I'm not enough. It's
Mm.
just that I internalized that because of these circumstances,
Mm.
or I was told that I'm not enough, or I'm selfish, or I'm whatever you were
Mm.
told when you were younger, whether it was from a family member or a coach or a friend or whatever it is you internalize. And you can start to really heal
Mm.
so that it doesn't carry with you any longer.
Yeah.
Because you know what, that is the thing. And I'll stop talking in a second because I could literally talk to you about the inner child for like 5 hours.
I love it.
But that really is the reason to do inner work. I know people shy away from it
Hmm.
because it does feel uncomfortable. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to go back to that. But the reality is, you're still living it right now in this moment, even if you aren't acknowledging the ways in which it is limiting you and holding you back. And to me, that is just a torturous way to live. I would much rather have somebody guide me to heal something and be able to move through it and understand it, and not let it limit me anymore than,
Absolutely. Yeah, then the alternative, which is
yeah.
when you don't have the distinction, we're just sort of that wounded inner child running the show anyways, and for me to
Yes.
say, I have a lot of insecurity and fear inside me, that's not the full makeup of who I am. And
No.
I could distinctly say that is that inner child in me.
Yes.
And before I made that distinction and went and actually retrieved that scared little girl inside me and did my inner work on embracing her and being tender with her and healing her and letting her know she's safe now,
Hmm.
that gives you your all the power in the world because you're
Yeah.
now the trusted adult to
Yes.
that wounded child, and you get to decide which of these am I gonna let run the show right now or be in charge.
Right. And the same is true in the conversation of not feeling enough
Mm,
and feeling more than enough.
mm,
So we have that moment of choice
mm.
often
Okay.
is, am I going to allow the part of me that doesn't feel enough to run the show and direct my life and tell me what I can and can't do? Or am I going to start to do the work to
Mm,
rebuild belief in myself and rebuild this connection to the knowing that I'm more than enough because it is alive and well within you, even if you don't have much access to it all the time. And
yeah.
it's really about rebuilding that connection.
Well, how do we do that? How do we start rebuilding that? Or even knowing, for the listener or viewer that feels like I don't even have access to the more than enough part of myself. Like how do we even start plugging into that and then rebuilding that relationship and connection?
There are many different tools that I share in More Than Enough. And one of them that I would start with is at the end of chapter one, which I do have recorded on audio. So you can either read it or what may be better is to just listen to me
Mm,
guide you through the exercise at the end of chapter one. And what I guide you to do is get connected to that little girl or that little boy within you
mm,
and to start talking from a place of love and
mm,
encouragement to that little girl or little boy so that you begin to change the way that you are treating yourself and talking to yourself. That is one simple thing that you could do right now, today,
mm,
is go listen to that audio. You could read chapter one. And one of the things I like about the way that More Than Enough is set up is there are bite-sized exercises in each chapter. So it's just a little like highlighted box and it gives you just a paragraph of something to read because everybody is so busy. And so sometimes it's, a matter of where do I fit in doing these things? You could literally go into one of the chapters and it's just coming to me right now. There's a bite-sized exercise where I ask you to simply ask yourself a couple times a day, am I encouraging myself from a place of love and kindness? Or is the mean critical voice running the show?
mm.
And
Okay.
so just being conscious of what is happening
Mm,
could just be a great way to start the process.
I love that. And it's almost like you're breaking down the monster, bit by
Mm-hmm.
bit, that feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's fully in charge. But when you
Mm-hmm.
start to just have that moment of remember, this is just part of me. This isn't who I
Yes.
am. This is just almost a defense mechanism or some way I learned to cope, to make sense of life that's I've allowed to run the show because I didn't know better. But now that I know
Mm-hmm.
this distinction, I can start saying, yeah, which part of me is talking to me right now.
Yeah, exactly. And every day is a brand new opportunity for us to do that.
Mm,
So, cumulatively, we can over time get run down. Like life breaks us down over time and it can really break down our confidence.
mm-hmm,
Being able to wake up every day and just remind yourself that every day is a brand new opportunity for me to start to shift
mm,
which part of me I am allowing to direct the show, which part of me I am listening to. And it may be so that the part of you that doesn't feel enough and the negative soundtrack is just more what you hear, and it's more what you kind of relate to and are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Have the power. And that's the beauty of this work. It's the beauty of doing any self-development work, is you have the power to start to make changes in what is going on in your internal world. Not that you can control the thoughts that are arising.
Right.
They just come, right? It's just the way it is, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can't control if we get triggered by something.
Mm-hmm.
There's an emotional response to something that just happens. But what you can start to do is really honor that and recognize that there's a reason I feel that way. There's a reason that negative thought is coming towards me. I don't have to make it mean anything about me. And I can actually start to look at ways to reconnect to the good stuff that I feel and what I bring to the table and who I am and what I have contributed, and times in my life when I did feel strong or courageous or fearless or powerful or whatever it is that you want more of in your life. And I guide you through a specific exercise in chapter 5 to do that and to reconnect to what we call the light shadow, the light part of us, like we were talking about
Yeah.
before, right?
Okay.
And it's super powerful to do that.
And it might take some muscling at first if we're not
Yeah,
used to even finding something nice to say about ourselves or something to acknowledge ourselves for. It may
yeah.
be a little artificial feeling at first. Is that on point?
It's totally on point. And that's why in the beginning, if you have a lot of negativity going on, do something like one of my YouTube meditations or any other, healer or coach that you really resonate with. I have a meditation on YouTube called Talk to Yourself with Love.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it feels forced,
Mm-hmm.
what is important is to start to affirm acts of love and words of encouragement for yourself, and to picture yourself as a little girl or a little boy, because it's much easier to be kinder and loving when we feel like, oh, this is the 5-year-old version of me versus the 53-year-old. Oh, I can handle it. I'm used to
Mm-hmm.
this negative internal criticism. So that's what I do at the end of chapter 1, is I
Okay.
have you envision yourself as a small child. And I think that's super helpful. Yeah.
Because some of us aren't used to or comfortable with love and kindness being directed toward us. In fact, it can feel a little funny or uncomfortable, or maybe we don't trust it. And so, how would you help somebody who's starting to direct those own feelings and inner thoughts and maybe even verbally addressing themselves in that way? And it might, there might be that bristling or like, this is wrong, this is scary. You say to picture yourself as a child, which I think is beautiful. What might you say to somebody who's like, I can't do it. I'm not used, this is uncomfortable.
It's okay. And sometimes that's not the place to start, because for us as human beings, and I'm so glad that you brought this up, sometimes it's really hard to embrace our light. And it is very challenging because of the way that life can break you down over time and the negative things that you've heard. It's easier to identify with that
Mm.
than it is to say, oh yes, I am, powerful and courageous and brilliant and smart and, all of those things. It's a
Lovable.
lot
Yeah.
harder for I would say most of us to embrace our light. And so it takes time to get to that place.
Okay.
So if you're in that spot right now, you're not alone. First of all, we
Mm-hmm.
all have times in our life when it's just really tough
Mm-hmm.
to talk to ourselves with love and to encourage ourselves. Start with just honoring that there's a reason that you don't feel good enough, or there's a reason that you have that negative soundtrack coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and just the understanding and building that bridge of compassion for yourself by understanding where it came from can be a start.
I love
And
that.
that's really all you need to do is just start the
Mm.
process.
Yeah,
Because I will tell you, even if you feel a lot of negativity, just the nature of who you are as a human being, there's a lot of light in there too.
for sure. In
There is,
everybody. In
in
everybody.
everybody.
I'm testament to having to kind of get comfortable with kindness toward myself. I mean, I feel now comfortable with loving on myself and saying nice things. But boy, I mean, it to your point, we never get rid of that old patterning. We can soften it or start to kind of increase our focus on, new patterning, and it's how we kind of create new grooves in our gray matter in our brains by what we focus on again and again and again in the practice we create. Your first book is called Clarity,
Mhm.
and I have not read Clarity. I'm excited to, though. But can you talk to us about how the journey with that book, because you wrote it and then sort of had a panic.
Yeah, I say that it's a miracle that book was ever published because what I had to really go through in terms of my not feeling enough and my insecurity and inadequacy and self-doubt and fear and just all of my internal stuff, all that I had to really move through, it was a lot. But there were a couple significant times when that book almost didn't make it to a bookshelf. Um, Originally, when I wrote the manuscript, was one, and then the second one was 3 weeks before the book. It was already done and printed and like ready to go. And I had a different publisher on that book than on More Than Enough, and the publisher never knew any of this. But I literally started to panic about 3 weeks prior to that book being published because I shared intimate details of
Mm,
what it was like to grow up in an alcoholic family. And right off on, I think, page 6 or 9 of that book, I shared, how I started to develop this not enough self and where that came from. And I got really nervous about that being in a book that
mm,
would forever be out there and would be something that I couldn't take back.
mm-hmm,
And so the little girl in me, and
mm-hmm,
this is where inner child work is just brilliant, was literally starting to backpedal. And I had to get to the root of, okay, what is the fear that I'm feeling?
mm,
And it was the fear of being exposed, that
mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to handle what somebody would have thought about being in an alcoholic family. Because one of the things I share in Clarity is that if you looked at our life from the outside, you would have never known
Well,
for the
yes.
most part. I mean, some of family, friends, and things like that would have known that there was
Mm-hmm.
something kind of going on. But, the, we looked like your average middle class family that had it all together and had a nice house and all of those things. And so I really had to be with, and this is the key, which I know for some people they don't want to do.
Mm,
I
mm-hmm,
had to really be with the feeling of
mm,
panic,
mm,
fear, and feeling exposed. I had to get present to that. And I share this in chapter 6 of More Than Enough, I think is the chapter. I had to also give myself permission to not publish the book and
ah,
just acknowledge that, maybe I'm not at the place where I could do this. And I
mm,
think that that's a really healthy thing to do because, it's one thing to push beyond fear and do it anyway and all of those things. But if you are not ready to do
mm-hmm,
that, and only you can know that in your heart and soul. Like
mm-hmm,
only you know if you can really push through something that's happening. But what I did was I got present to it and I just let myself sit with those feelings and I connected with that little girl every day. And I woke up one day just feeling totally okay with it. And I knew that not only was I going to be okay with that
Mm,
information out there, but I was excited about having clarity published.
nice.
And I knew that it was part of my life's purpose. And one of the things I got connected to, which I think is really important for many people that are in the profession of helping and healing in some way, is if I was going to help one person with that book that experienced the pain and the trauma that I did, it
Mm,
was well worth it to me to
mm,
get out of my own way.
mm,
And sometimes that is my prayer.
mm.
So if I am super in my wounded stuff
Yeah.
on any given day, or if I'm doing something new, like I have a TV segment that's coming up and I'm driving to the station and I'm like, oh my gosh. And
Mm.
and I will tell you, every night before I do a TV show, I always say to myself, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Why would I
Mm-hmm.
want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. I'm healed. I'm fine. I don't need to go on TV. I
Yeah.
don't want to go on TV. Like, I literally go through this every single time. And so, again, I know it is just this fear of showing up and
Yeah.
being exposed and, maybe fumbling on my words or whatever it is that I'm afraid is going to happen in
Mm.
that moment. And it's really about getting present to that and getting connected to that and honoring that that's how you feel and giving yourself permission to not do it if it's really not in your highest and best interest. But,
Yeah.
um, the prayer that I always say is, help me get out of my own way so that I can bring the message and the wisdom that
Mm.
people need to hear through.
I'm writing that
Help me get out
down.
of
It's so brilliant. It's difficult because I think it's as I listen to you and I too I can just put myself into those shoes so easily. I think we fear humiliation more than death on some, sort of fundamental. We'd rather just die and get it out of the way than have to face the deep rejection of humiliation or of really getting it wrong publicly,
my. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I think in order to really move through that, you have
Hmm.
to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of difficult if you really are having a lot of fear and panic to get yourself to do something that you're that afraid of,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I would totally agree with you on that. And for me, this has been one of the ways that I'm able to do it, is to connect with myself
Hmm.
internally, to say that prayer, help me get out of my own way. And by really honoring that it's possible that I may help one person
Hmm.
not have to go through some of what I've gone through,
Yeah.
that alone reconnects me to my light.
Mm.
And then that part of me is activated and I can move forward.
Yeah. And you can trust that. There's a self trust um, lack of or kind of building those muscles at play here because I think in that, I know for me, self rejection was a big part of my, just rejecting myself growing up. And so when you do that over and over because you're trying to get away from those feelings of
Mm-hmm.
not being good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe why we disconnect from, we break that relationship with our inner child and try to run
Mm-hmm.
and be, this
Yeah.
false sense of self because of the shame and the pain in that. But the self trust, because what I'm hearing is you give yourself time to build your trust, to tell that part of yourself that's afraid that you're not going to abandon that part of yourself no matter
Right.
what.
Yeah. That's so beautifully said. And it takes time.
Mm,
It does. It takes time to rebuild that trust, rebuild that connection with yourself, and just reminding yourself there's a reason I disconnected
Mm-hmm.
from whatever quality you disconnected from, or from that inner child. There's a reason I disconnected, and it's always about survival and
Mm-hmm.
self-protection and all of those things, or protecting somebody else that you loved.
Mm-hmm.
And so you disconnected from yourself to take care of that person. So there's a lot of different reasons we do that, but it takes time to rebuild that. But I will tell you, and anybody, you will tell people, anybody that has healed from trauma, it is so worth it. And I really believe it's one of the main things that we are here to do
Mm-hmm.
in this journey of life,
Mm-hmm.
is to heal and to embrace who we are, and
Mm-hmm.
then to bring that to everybody around us, whatever it is our profession. Like, not
Right.
everybody is going to be a healer or is helping somebody in terms of their inner world, or the things that you and I are talking about. But whatever profession, whatever your gift is, whatever your unique contribution is, whether it's being a mom and being present for your kids, or doing your art, or writing a book, or whatever you are up to,
Mm-hmm.
it's so worth it to get to that connection to who you are and your woundedness, so that you know that that is going to come up at some point in time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're prepared that it's going to arise. And
Yeah.
that's really why Clarity got published, was because by the time that Clarity was published, that was like 8 years ago. So at that point, I had already been individually coaching people for what, let me do the math, like 16
16.
years, something like that, 15, 16 years. And I had done a lot of my own self development work. So I was very connected, and knew what I needed to do. I just needed to do the work to do that. So,
Mm-hmm. It's such a gift. I really do believe you go right to the heart of the matter in this work, because I feel like we can make a decision and start taking action, try to change our lives, steer the ship, turn a lifetime of patterning, just by trying to take on different behavior. But we'll always be pulled back to our sort of
yeah,
status quo until
yeah,
we understand that there's no way around it. You have
right.
to go through it. And
Yeah,
so, I mean, I feel like you're giving people the keys to the universe. Like, it's
yeah,
all right here. You go in and you listen to what's going on. You make
yeah,
space for it. You tell yourself, you don't have to. We don't have to do this. Let's just be in this
yeah,
space right now. And
yeah,
then you realize, oh, I have a choice now.
yeah. You do. And you have within you everything that you need. You are who you need to be. You may need to do some more self development work, or you might need to do training in your craft, or you might need to, show up and get better at it. But
Yeah,
all of those things are doable
yeah.
at the core of who you are. You are who you need to be to fulfill your life's purpose. Otherwise, it wouldn't be your life's purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I could talk to you for 7 more hours, but what I want to give you the chance to share, and for people who are really engaged with this work and want to know more, tell us how they can. I'll put your link on our show notes and stuff, but how can they get a copy of your book, and tell us a little bit about this beautiful structure you've created around the book, which are these book clubs that you do over several weeks and repeat them. So tell us how we can get more of you and access to this material.
Thank you. So you can join me on Facebook or Instagram. I'm there often sharing little tidbits from the book, and I would love for you to come join me and comment. You can go to my website. My book is on there. It's also on Amazon. And if you do want a copy of More Than Enough and you want it autographed, you can go to my website, and I will also send you Clarity as my way of saying thank you. So that's kind of cool. I'll sign both
Mm,
of them. And then in terms of a book club, this is a pretty cool thing,
yeah.
because it actually arose from a client of mine back when Clarity was first published. And she said, "You're going to take me and my team through Clarity."
Mm.
And my first reaction was, I don't have time to
Yeah.
take you and your team through Clarity. I think that sounds really fun and everything. And she's like, "No, you're going to take me and my team through Clarity because we want to read the book with you guiding us through it."
Mm.
And so I loved her, and, I just did what she said, and I took her and her team through Clarity. And that was the very first book club. And
Mhm.
so with Clarity, we did 21 10-week series book clubs over the past 8 years.
Amazing.
So right now we are in the very first one for More Than Enough that just started actually a week ago. And the way that I structure it is we have 10 weeks together. So there's 10 chapters, and you are reading the book alongside me and a small group. It's about 15 people that end up joining us. I keep them very small because I want it to be intimate. I don't want 100 people doing this at once. You just kind of get lost in the shuffle, right?
Sure.
So I cap it at 15. And we have a group call every other week. So there's 5 group calls, and on the group call, it's an hour long, and we do it via conference line. And so I share distinctions from the chapters we're working on. So you get to read the book and hear it from me as the life coach and author's perspective on just giving you more insight into each chapter. And then we have sharing on the call, and people share like what their inner world is like and what they're grappling with and their breakthroughs. It's just so awesome. And then there's also an individual coaching session with me, so you get a feel of what it's like to do that deeper work. And then we also have a group chat where in between our calls, you have the opportunity to come and share on a voice memo. It's a really cool app. It's called Voxer, and you put it on your phone, and you have the ability to share with me and the group what you're working on and what's happening. So
Which
it's super cool, super
it
fun.
sounds amazing. And the Vox, I think, just when we get to celebrate our wins or discoveries
Yes.
within the context of a group or a person we trust or a small
Yeah.
group, that it's that work of giving voice to the more than enough part of ourselves and training
Yeah.
those muscles to remember, oh yes, that was a victory. It could be tiny. That's a victory. And as we do that over and over, we start to be able to hear that distinction and that voice of, which
Yeah.
the light, the truth in us. Really, it's why we're here. It's
It
to
is.
shine our light.
It is. Yeah,
So,
and it's just really fun because the book comes alive and you're reading it with other people, throughout the 10 weeks, and you can ask me questions. And, sometimes you're reading a book and you want to ask the author, like, "Well, what about this situation? I know you say this
yeah.
here, but does this really apply to me? Does this apply to that?" And the book club gives you the opportunity to do that. And it's just so fun. And just kind of from a self-centered perspective, for me, I remember when I did the first book club, and it just, I had done individual coaching sessions for so long that hearing people shift through things just from reading it in a book felt like such an out of body experience to me. It was like, well, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Or I don't even remember writing that part of the book. Like, wow, you got that much from that page. Like, just from like a self,
Yeah.
yeah, a self perspective.
Yeah.
It's just so fun
Just
to
having,
watch what people resonate with. Yeah.
right, and having that mirror held up to you to say, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah. Yeah, which is so amazing because all of us have such wisdom through our experiences and through the
Yes.
struggles that we have to
Yes.
share to make a difference, a real
Yeah.
difference in the world. And
Yeah.
I hope all of us listening and watching know how important you are to this planet, because you can say something, to your point, that you don't even realize hasn't the impact that it can have on somebody, or you can do some small gesture or some big gesture that really can change the outcome of somebody's life.
And I think what would be fun is for us to do another segment at some point and talk about one of the things that I think is part of societal conditioning, and especially for women,
Mm,
is this notion of it's not okay to be selfish,
mm,
and that you're too big for your britches,
uh,
and to just different messages that we get over time,
mm.
which then have us kind of shrink back into what it is that we think is acceptable. And to be able to understand that, like, at the depth of who we are, sharing your light is
Mm,
actually the most important thing you can do. And it's the reason that you're here. So, all of the things that we get in terms, or I should say some, I shouldn't use that blanket word
mhm,
all. Some of the messaging that we get is to not shine our light
mhm,
and to not be selfish. And
mhm.
what I think would be awesome is for us to talk about how essential it is
Okay.
to balance out, taking care of other people and doing the things that we need to do in life while really having this space
Mm,
where we are totally self focused. If you
mm.
can't use the word selfish, it's all good. Go with self focused. And you are really honing your own inner world and embracing your light so that you can bring it
Mm,
to everybody around you. Because
mm.
if you look at the chaos and the destruction and I don't want to get on a tangent
Yeah.
because we'll be here for 4 more hours, but if you look at all that happens in our world, we need more light.
Yeah.
And we each need more light in our own lives, and
Mm,
that comes from within, and it comes from giving ourselves permission to do that. And then other people see us and they go, oh, I want to do that. And then
yeah.
they're inspired to,
Ah,
like, show up a little more. And it's that ripple effect, right? Which is why I
yeah.
wanted to do this podcast with you, because I love your energy and I love just, what you're sharing in the world, and
Mm,
your authenticity of being able to say, like,
yeah.
I feel this way and I feel that way, and I'm still
Yeah.
showing up and doing my thing. And so I think, that could be another conversation at some point in the future.
We're doing it because I can't tell
Yeah.
you, the last 24, 36 hours for me have been quite cathartic in me really, at kind of admitting and coming to terms with my calling, which is really like to bring light work into the mainstream. Like, I'm done with the darkness. I'm done with, listening to hatred and vitriol and just immediately going to what's wrong here. Let's immediate, turn the, what new frenzy can we pounce on? Like starving, like the Lion King, the hyenas were just ready to pounce on the next disaster. And I'm really standing in my light work, and that there are so many light workers in the
Yeah.
closet, and I don't mean to be woo woo, but there are so many of us that are ready to
Yeah.
step forth and say,
Yeah.
there is a new calling to be had and a new way to lead this species forward. And I think we all want some relief and we all want more light. So yes, we will
Yeah.
we will do this again, and I love that focus.
Yeah. Me
I love
too.
it.
Okay.
All right, Diane, thank you so much. I'm going to put your links to your stuff in the show notes, and I'm so honored to spend the last hour with you. I'm
Me too.
delighted, and thank you so much for the work you're doing
Thank you.
to heal this world.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was so fun. And I look forward to talking more in the future.
Great. Okay. Be well. Bye, everybody. Bye bye.